Let's talk about the origin of life problem. The question being, how did organic life arise from non-organic material? There are some experiments that were done in the early 20th century in which, under certain conditions, it looked as though maybe organic material could be created from non-organic material, but there really, as you point out, has not been a great explanation of how non-organic material could create an information system like DNA. I was wondering if you could elucidate that.
So yeah, the famous experiment still in a lot of the biology textbooks is the Miller-Urey experiment of 1952, 1953. They sparked a chamber that had gases known as reducing gases that then spontaneously produced a few of the 20 protein-forming amino acids, 2 or 3. The problem is that amino acids do not a protein make, and proteins by themselves do not make life. So they were really quite a long ways away from demonstrating anything like a spontaneous chemical origin of life. It's ironic that that experiment was performed in the same year as Watson and Crick's discovery of the structure of the DNA molecule and the subsequent elucidation of the information-bearing properties of the molecule. Because in what's called chemical evolutionary theory, by the 1960s and certainly by the early 1980s, the field reached a state of impasse precisely because the biologists and the biochemists realized that to build an actual living cell, you've got to have information-rich molecules. You can't just have the components, you can't just have the letters, you've got to have the sentences. And so there were a number of problems with the Miller-Urey experiment. One was they presupposed conditions on the early Earth and in the early Earth's atmosphere that didn't actually match the conditions on the early Earth. We didn't have a reducing atmosphere. We had a slightly oxidizing or neutral atmosphere. You rerun those experiments, you don't get amino acids forming spontaneously. But the bigger problem was, how do you arrange the amino acids in the very specific ways that are required to form a three-dimensional structure called a protein fold? And that problem hasn't been solved apart from watching DNA do it inside living cells. So to build proteins, what we know is you need information stored in the DNA molecule. And so as the molecular biological revolution unfolded in the 50s, 60s, 70s, the scientists working on the origin of life realized the problem was much harder than they realized, because they didn't just need to account for certain kinds of building blocks of life. They needed to account for the information that would organize the building blocks into DNA molecules, into protein molecules, and into the complex information processing systems that characterize even the simplest living cells.
I'm skeptical of the claim.
I'm skeptical.
We are skeptical
of claims for the ability of
random mutations
and natural selection
to account for the complexity of life.
A careful examination
of the evidence
for Darwinian theory
should be encouraged.
skeptical.
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 Of claims
for the ability
of random mutations
and natural selection
to account for
the complexity.
The complexity.
To account for the complexity of life.
Careful examination.
Of the evidence.
For Darwinian theory
should be encouraged.
The theory of evolution is now being challenged by a new theory that says the universe looks designed because it was designed. The concept is called intelligent design because it claims there was an intelligence behind creation. A leading proponent is Dr. Stephen Meyer. He's director of the Center for Science and Culture at Seattle's Discovery Institute and co-author of Darwinism, Design, and Public Education. Disagreeing with him is Dr. Michael Shermer, publisher of Skeptic Magazine and author of The Science of Good and Evil. I want to start with you, Dr. Meyer, because you're kind of making the affirmative claim here and say, you know, if you can just avoid the technical jargon as much as you can, give me 3 or 4 reasons why you believe there is an intelligent designer of the universe.
You bet. Maybe I should start from the beginning. Cosmologists and physicists now tell us that the universe began from a finite time ago, from an infinitesimally small spatial volume, effectively a 0 point, in which there was neither matter, nor space, nor time, nor energy. And this points to a cause beyond the universe, for the cause of the universe itself, a cause that would transcend matter, space, time, and energy. Secondly, physicists are now talking about the fine-tuning of the universe. They tell us that the initial arrangement of matter, the laws and constants of physics, are all delicately balanced to allow for life to exist. For example, if the force of gravitational attraction were a little bit stronger or weaker, if the rate of the expansion of the universe were a little bigger or smaller, life would be impossible as we know it. One physicist, Sir Fred Hoyle, has said that it looks as if a super intellect has monkeyed with physics and chemistry to make life possible. And thirdly, and I think most importantly, in the realm of biology, people have over the last 50 years discovered an intricate realm of nanotechnology and information processing. There are little miniature circuits inside cells, so-called signal transduction circuits. There are little miniature machines. My colleague Michael Behe at the Discovery Institute has made one of these famous, a little rotary engine inside the cell wall that looks like something, for all the world, like something that Mazda designed. It has O-rings, it has bushings, it has a drive shaft, it has a little propeller that moves this little bacterium through liquid. This is high tech in low life. And I think finally and most importantly is the discovery that at the base of all life depends on information, that it depends on a 4-character digital code that is resident in the DNA molecule. And people who are trying to explain the origin of life through various types of evolutionary theory have been utterly flummoxed by the question of the origin of these genetic assembly instructions.
Michael, you're the editor of Skeptic Magazine. I don't expect you to be anything less than skeptical about that. Well, how do you analyze the evidence as Dr. Meyer presented it?
Well, it's important to note that when we're talking about those kinds of questions, regardless of whether the answers I'm about to give are right or not, and they may change because science is constantly changing, the default answer is not that therefore there must be a designer or a God. A default answer that's perfectly acceptable in science is we don't know. Now, we do know actually quite a bit about the 4 categories that Stephen just discussed. For example, the fact that the universe had an origin and therefore there must have been a creator, just begs the question of, well, who created the creator or the intelligent designer? The fact that something has to have a creation just leads to the next question of, well, then who created that entity and who created that entity? And the theological answer is, well, God is that which does not need to be created. Well, why can't the universe be that which does not need to be created?
Okay, let's pause there. Michael, that's a very good point.
Yeah.
Very good point, Stephen.
What I would say to that is that philosophically, something has to be the thing from which everything else comes. Something has to be what philosophers call the prime reality. And
why does it have to be God? I mean, maybe who created God? That's what I want to know.
The Big Bang Theory and general relativity suggest that matter is a crummy candidate to be the thing from which everything else comes, because if you go back far enough, you end up with a place in which you have no matter, no space, no time, no energy.
It may just be pure energy. It could be quantum foam fluctuation. Could be a black hole in another universe. It could be a number of things. We're not sure yet.
What physicists are saying now is that the primary thing at the very beginning is actually an information wave. And again, we're back to the same argument I was making in biology, that information in our experience comes from mind. And so from what we know about the causes of the origin of information, we're looking at evidence of design not only in life, but right back to the beginning of the universe.
Okay, but where did the information come from, in your opinion, in the first place?
I think it came from an intelligent creator that transcends matter, space, time, and energy.
And who created that intelligent creator?
I think that is the prime reality.
Okay, Michael, beyond this issue of the beginning of the universe, and it seems to me he's saying whatever begins to exist has a cause. The universe, virtually every scientist admits, began to exist, therefore must have a cause.
Yeah, but you're just talking about ultimate causes.
I understand that, but the question then becomes, you know...
Yeah, let's talk about design and biology.
All right, let's move on to biology.
Let's go to the next point. It looks designed. It is designed. That's why it looks designed. It is designed. We're not debating whether it's design or not. There is design. You'd have to be barking mad to not think that the life is not designed. It is designed, but it's designed from the bottom up by a natural process of evolution. And that's why it looks tinkered and not very well designed and sort of patchworked and put together from previous organisms and structures and functions and so on. It doesn't look to me very well intelligent designed.
Good point, Stephen. How do you respond to those?
Well, I think it's exquisitely designed, especially when you look at what's going on at the molecular level and the information processing system that is the basis of all living systems. He's made the argument, for example, that the eye is not well designed because the wiring appears inverted to some physiologists. But others dispute that and say that the vertebrate eye is an exquisitely designed system that represents what engineers call constrained optimization, where many factors have been optimized to achieve the best overall functionality. So this vertebrate eye that evolutionists say is not well designed, that looks tinkered with, is actually the same eye that eagles use to achieve this incredible visual acuity that they have.
Okay, we're going to come back in just a moment. We're going to hear more about Darwin versus design. We're back discussing evolution versus intelligent design with Dr. Stephen Meyer and Dr. Michael Shermer. Stephen, the intelligent design movement has been criticized by some by saying, hey, it's just a bunch of Christians trying to get their theological viewpoint propagated. Is that a fair criticism?
Well, it would be fair if it were also fair to say that Darwinism has been undermined in its credibility by the fact that many or most Darwinists are agnostics or atheists. I mean, Michael Shermer and Eugenie Scott and Richard Dawkins have all signed the Third Humanist Manifesto, which is a call for an aggressive atheistic world order. And two can play that motive-mongering game, but the problem with it is that it doesn't settle anything. You have to evaluate arguments by the quality of the evidence and the reasoning that are used to support them.
And there has been
Michael Shermer wants to say that belief in intelligent design is a weird belief that's used to justify a prior religious commitment. We think it's a perfectly sensible belief, whatever your religious commitment. If you see evidence of software or something that functions like software, it's perfectly reasonable to infer that there was a programmer.
Of course, but when almost every single member I know of your movement is an evangelical Christian, you hardly have any Jews or Baptists or Buddhists or anything like that, That makes me suspect. That just makes me suspect of something. It would be like if every single member of a group were Democrat or Republican, and I would think, okay, maybe they're right, but that makes me skeptical of something else going on here.
Stephen, I want to ask you, is it possible to believe in Darwinian evolution and be a Christian?
It's certainly possible as a personal matter, but I think it's logically contradictory. The problem is it really depends on what you mean by evolution. If by evolution you mean simply that things change, yeah, things change, and you can believe that and be a Christian, a theist, a Jew, anything you like, and be logically consistent. What Darwinism says, though, is things change as a result of a purely undirected natural process.
I don't see why it couldn't be perfectly reasonable for a believer to think that it or God or whoever used the natural forces to create life as it is. That's how God works. What's wrong with that?
Well, that's right. If he uses natural forces, directs them in some way, that's a form of design. That's not what Darwinism says. Darwinism says things look designed, but they're not really, because an undirected process produced the appearance of design.
But I mean the actual...
A designer can't direct an undirected process.
Well, a designer could use natural selection. A designer could do anything he wants, particularly
if it's directed process, isn't it? It's a directed process.
Well, I mean, first of all, then why are you an atheist, Michael? And secondly, or an agnostic, or whatever you are. And secondly, this is Darwin explicitly rejected that interpretation of natural selection. Okay. The whole point of it is that it's natural selection, he said, acting on random variation. If you want to make it, if you want God directing it, it defeats the purpose of my theory, he said.
Okay, two answers. One, I don't believe in God because I don't think the evidence is strong enough to make that commitment, which is not a small commitment to make. It's an important, serious one. I was once a born-again Christian. I did that. It was serious. I don't think it's something you take lightly, and my evaluation of the evidence now is it's not enough. So, and two, I have a commitment to science, and the scientific method requires that we look for natural explanations for natural phenomena. There is no such thing as the supernatural or the paranormal. There's just the natural, the normal, and all the stuff we can't explain yet. And it's okay in science to just say, I don't know. We don't have answers to all these things.
Well, we agree with that, too. I mean, there's an awful lot of dogmatic Darwinism that would be much better served by exactly the attitude that you suggest, that, you know,
okay,
rather than saying we understand something we don't, it's good to say we don't know.
Yeah.
But our argument is based on what we know, and on a kind of logical apparatus that's used routinely in science, which is to say, given the evidence, what's the best explanation given everything we know so far? And that's the grounds by which we infer design.
Terrific. Very good debate. Thanks for exploring both of it, guys.